Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Jim Dar's Tone Shifter channel, where we show you how to take any guitar and make it sound and play better. So join me in the Guitar Cabin, our musical sanctuary from day-to-day life, as we explore another really cool guitar project. I'm excited. Let's get to it. Well, welcome back, my friends, for another episode of the BasketCase Les Paul. Can it be brought back to life? As you recall, in the previous episodes, we took a really beat up, abused, sanded down to almost nothing Les Paul, and we're making it a whole guitar again. To date, we've put a cap on the back, we've leveled the back out, we've routed for the control cavities, we've managed the situation that we had with the neck joint. We've tried to add some additional depth back into the neck in the previous episodes, so check that out if you haven't seen it. And today we're going to actually finish the neck and hopefully string it up and see what it does. In the previous episodes, I've talked about putting a veneer to add some more depth to the neck. It's not really a veneer. It's really almost 1/8 of an inch, what I would call an elevator extender, or neck depth extender, or neck shim. The idea is to add more depth to the neck to make it back to the original profile. So I've got a piece of very thin mahogany, as I said, just a little under 1/8 of an inch. I've joined it together. The middle seam is not too important because it's going to get routed out anyway for the truss rod channel. But what I'm trying to do is make it a little wider than normal so I can taper the side feel of the neck to the fingerboard binding. The fingerboard binding hasn't been touched, so that leaves us ample room to have the original width of the fingerboard and neck that it had originally. So I'm using a template that I used to build guitar neck profiles, using my overhead pin router and shaving the shim piece down just so it's a little bit wider than the width of the binding on the neck itself. The end result is a tapered shim representing a little bit of an overhang that'll be trimmed off once it gets glued on. Now the next step is gluing the elevator shim to the neck itself and positioning it properly for the correct string angle once it hits the guitar. And here I am, after careful consideration and planning, gluing the elevator extender to the neck itself. Let's keep our fingers crossed that it comes out straight and I don't twist the neck in the process. You can see I'm using leveling clamps on the top and the bottom. Now comes the task of actually getting the fingerboard glued down in the right position. Because when you glue something, two pieces of wood together with glue, they tend to slip and slide. So I'm actually going to use a locating pin, a 1/16 of an inch drill bit, drill down through the fingerboard and align it carefully as a dry fit, so then when I put the glue on and the clamps on, it'll go right down into the correct position, hopefully. Now it's time to radius the back that I added on to make it conform to the front. Do this very carefully, not to dig into the sides and to go completely around. In the neck joint itself, I've added enough depth to the back cap, keeping it a little bit shy of 1 3/4 inches and still allowing the bearing on the radius trimming bit to guide on the body itself without hitting the neck. Got a little tear out, got to do a lot of sanding coming up, but first want to get the neck on and get the thing strung up and see what happens. Hopefully, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed here, hopefully the neck will be stable, although we might have some issues because there's so many pieces of wood glued to it, but it should settle out if we do have issues. So the next couple of shots will show you the rounded edges of the fingerboard. I still have to make a template and route for the control cavity covers. I'm actually going to do that probably in the next week or so. I'm going to let the neck and the guitar stabilize and adjust, see what happens to the neck. But first, let's talk about the fingerboard and how it was put on. So now we've got to actually take the guitar and route it for the truss rod channel. We're going to use the same jig I did to route out the 1/2 inch wide spline that we put in the back to extend the depth of the neck itself. So it's a similar type of operation. I want to control how deep I go. Don't want to go too deep to blow through the back or to make the wood very weak there, so it's a point of potential failure in the future. I used my trusty jig, and it actually went smoothly and came out well. So that's all we can expect, all we can hope for. And here's the neck ready for the fingerboard after we install a truss rod. You get a good idea of the level and quality of work that you achieve having the right tools at your disposal. So I think it's going to come out pretty well so far. Textbook. The truss rod is an actual Gibson truss rod from the mid-60s that I had. There was a little bit of a piece that was flattened out on it, but I don't think it will affect the ability. And if you look in the bottom right-hand corner of the picture that you're looking at, you'll actually see the spline that's going to be put in that's radius. I used about, I think, a 220-inch radius typically for that, and I cut the spacers out to go into the slot so there's a nice gentle curve. The spline itself matches about a 220-inch radius that seems to work well with Gibson type truss rods. Here's a close-up of the spline being glued in. You can see the maple cap and back locks into the end of the Gibson truss rod so it won't twist. I'm actually going to reinforce that with a little bit of JB weld compound in there to make sure that all voids from previous holes, in case I didn't line anything up exactly, is filled so we don't get any twisting, because if the end of that truss rod starts twisting, somebody's got to take the fingerboard off and put a new truss rod in, and I don't want that to be me. So next we're going to level the spline out after the glue dries, and you can see I use my old trusty chisel trying to make sure I don't get the chisel off to the side to create a potential gap between the elevator piece and the fingerboard itself. But you can see I'm working this down gradually and getting it level with the piece that we just glued on in the previous shot. Here it is, almost done. Looking pretty good. So far, as I said earlier, so good. Now here's a shot of the guitar ready for a fingerboard fitting. Do the dry fit first, as we talked about. Going to start with 2 pilot holes, very, very small. I actually did it in the center because I didn't want to pull the frets out, but once I finished and took a close look at the frets themselves, there's almost nothing left to them, and they're going to probably have to be replaced. So I want to do that. I'm probably going to do that after I finish the guitar, but I may do it before. But in the meantime, they'll have to stay on till we quickly assess it and get ready for all the clamps. Clamps, clamps, clamps. Once again, here we go with all the clamps, all the clamps. Here we are, Clamp City. I'm also trying to check the fingerboard to make sure that it's straight with my straight edge by sliding it in on the left-hand side. And let's not forget why we're doing this. This is the genuine Gibson Les Paul Special 55, their first reissue attempt. And I think it's going to come out okay. Here's some more pictures of the clamps doing their job. A lot of clamps, a lot of different type of clamps. And here it is, glued on. We're going to let it sit for a while and then probably try to tension it, try to adjust the truss rod, and see what happens. Here's a close-up of that extender piece. And you can see really how thick the extender piece is here by looking at the right-hand side of the screen. You've got the extender piece with the nut area and then the binding of the guitar itself. Now I said that I made the extender piece a little wider, and I did that, and you can see it here because I want to taper that down to a nice smooth feel of what I'm trying to get is a C-neck, a thick C-neck style feel to the neck. So that's going to help me out. And you can see I've gotten most of that excess wood from the extender piece out. The guitar's taking shape, and it's time to put the studs for the bridge back into the body. I'm going to get the ground wire in there first. Actually just pound that so it's just a level or a little bit below the surface without marring it. The guitar's finally looking like a guitar again. The only question remains, at least at the present time, is what type of machine heads do I put on it to string it up to test it. It's already been reamed out for Grovers. I have some patent pending Grovers that I'll put in as a placeholder here. Then I'll probably use a modern tuner with a higher gear ratio. But I don't want to expand the tuning peg holes any further than they already are. Don't necessarily want to plug them up either because I think the Grovers will do pretty well. So I've got the posts in, got the studs in. All we need is the bridge. And then a set of 1046s is what I'd like to put on it. The bridge is in position. We're almost ready to test this thing out. Fingers crossed. Say a prayer. Hope we don't have a nightmare. Guitar is strung up, tuned up to tension. Seems to be holding tension pretty well. I'm pretty happy with the way the neck looks at this point. Kind of take a second and take all these pictures in and remember where we started from and where we are now. Still got a long way to go, a lot of sanding to get a good finish. And then if the neck is stable, I'll refret it as well, and we'll level adjust the, do a regular setup on the guitar. One of the things that we want you to make note of is that these pictures here of the back, there's no finish on it. Although it looks like it might have been stained or something, that's just some weird lighting that I don't know how that happened. But there is no stain, no filler, no wash coat on the back of the body. So with the radius tear out and the general grit paper I've used previously, I'm going to have to do a lot of sanding with this guitar. But I don't want to do it until I know that everything is stable and everything is going to work fine. We're going to get enough clearance to get proper, good string height action with the limited amount of adjustability that we've got in the bridge itself. I'm enjoying these pictures. I feel a great sense of accomplishment. But don't celebrate too early because trouble is just around the bend. We'll cover that trouble next time. But until then, enjoy these parting shots. So as always, keep your comments and suggestions coming in. Like this channel, subscribe, like the video. I'd appreciate it very much. Subscribe and ring the bell so you'll get notifications. I appreciate all the viewers and people that have commented. And like you all to be kind, be smart, have fun, learn something new every day. But most of all, be safe. Thanks. Till next time.